How's it going, YouTube? Coming to today with another video, and today this is going to be the final video before YCS Orlando. I want to make sure that you all are aware of what the typical end boards look like on a lot of the different decks, just because we're going to be going into a very variance tournament. There's going to be a lot of different things that are going to be playing a very large factor, and I want to make sure that your knowledge is not one of them, because if you have to go in there knowing every single end board and you don't know them, it's rough. So at least you can take this variance out, and you already know that some end boards will be varianced, but you'll have a baseline, and that's the most important part. Because as long as you know what the cards do, why they're there, then you'll know how to adjust on the fly. And I think that's going to be at least the slightest bit advantage for you going into the tournament. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RW, Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. Also subscribe to the channel so we can hit 30,000. I can't wait. I really can't wait. But, you know, I look forward to that every single day, and I hope you do too. But without further ado, let's hop right on into the first slide. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is going to be really popular hand traps that should be main specific. If you can play Impulse, you should be on Impulse. This does include Shifter. I just didn't add it because it's like specifically Malice, right? And Impulse is a few different decks that can play it, so I wanted to put that because it's a little bit on a larger scale. But if you can play Impulse, you should play Impulse. This card's absolutely absurd, especially right now. I feel like this card's very good in Mitsurugi, so something you do want to run. Droll and Lockbird, another card where you could be running this as a playset in the main deck. You could be playing 2 in the main, 1 in the side. I think this card is absolutely phenomenal, and you should be on it if you can. Again, some people prefer not to, but I think this card is just too good not to. A lot of times you can just make people pass. Ash, of course, it's Ash. Stop the Charmies, stop your opponent. This card just never really gets sided out either. You can side out some of your other hand traps, but it's usually Ash, so it just stays in at 3 at all times. Nib, this is a card I've been seeing people drop lately. Do not drop Nib. Nib is so good. If you don't know why, you can check out my last video where I talk about the interaction with Nibiru and Ameno. It's really strong, and that's something where you still want to be able to clear the board no matter what, because even if they're going to bring back Ameno, you can still get rid of the duo drive and duo drive effect, and you can cut off the entire Ryziel side of their end board. Also Imperium because it's Imperium, and then Fua. Now for the side deck hand traps, there's not a whole lot. I've been seeing Bestials move back and forth between the main and side. Some are split between the main and side. Some are moving to the side. So I didn't really want to add those here. Bestials are still going to be really popular. It depends on if you want to lean heavier into them or less into them at all. I've seen them get cut. I've also seen them down to like a 2 count. So like 1 Druis, 1 Mag. So definitely very interesting. I definitely thought we were going to see a lot more. But at the moment, I'm seeing a lot less. Phantasma is still seeing a lot of popularity in the sideboards as of now, so be careful about that. If you do have an Ash and you're not hitting like a Charmy or something, you might have to use it on like a Phantasma, especially if you're on Malice. Usually you'll see Phantasma sided in against you, so make sure that you do have a game plan for that. Then Lancia, of course, is Lancia. Everyone's playing that card right now. And then the Perulia and the Muals. A lot of people are siding 3 and 3. Or 3 or 3. Like one or the other, but I've seen a lot of people siding 3 and 3, which is kind of crazy if they're already maining Fua, because that's 9 Molcharmies, and that's a bit excessive, but I guess they're different matchups that are going to be more impactful for each. But regardless, you have to respect Malice in your siding, or you will just lose immediately. Talking about the better breakers in the format, Metaltronus being one of them, it's really good, and there's a lot of crossover, especially if you're playing like the Fiendsmith cards, or if you're playing like a build with a Bow, you can hit a lot of different things too, which I think is really nice, because you can also go like Metaltronus, summon a Bow into like a Caesar, which is really cool, and vice versa. I really do like Metaltronus alone. I really didn't, and then I had to have a lot of convincing, but now I do. I think the card's fine. But overall, this is a card that you should run. You should try to figure out if there are other cards you can hit with this in your build, and if you can't, try to find room to make other options, and if you can't, then don't try to force it. But it's a really good card. Ulti Slayer, if you're afraid of Dweller, this has to be Xyz's Encore. I've been seeing that card a lot, especially in like the Mitsurugi sideboards and like Memento sideboards. Decks that really cannot handle getting hit with the Dweller, they are siding Xyz's Encore. That is getting very popular. The other one here is Book of Eclipse. I get a lot of comments that are like, Book of Eclipse is dead, that card sucks because everyone has Twin. But Book of Eclipse, still a very powerful card. This card is still absolutely broken. And then if you have like Bell or Bestial and you book the board, they pop their own detonator, and then you like Bestial away the target for the Twin, it's GG's, right? So that's another one that you want to be on top of. I think Eclipse is still very, very strong, has a lot of merit into the format. So if you do need a very cheap board breaker, this is going to be another one for you that works going first or second. Honorable mention, if your opponent doesn't have Solemn Judgment, this card's going to go crazy. If they do, it's going to suck. It really depends. But this card really does punish people who are not ready for it. So this is a card that could be very high rolly into the weekend. We're not in Las Vegas this weekend, so I don't know if I have the guts to go ahead and high roll someone. But, you know, this is going to be a card where if you bring it in, it's either going to be really impactful or just be the worst card in your side deck. So it's going to be a you call, but I think this card is worth the honorable mention. Let's talk about some end boards. This is something that I really wanted to bring up because this is going to be really crucial to your playtesting, really crucial to your tournament experience. Shout out to Triff for this one. I played against Triff. This was the full end board for Mitsurugi. His sets right now are Impermanent Prayer. Usually it's going to be the Mitsurugi trap. Some people are signing the card now, and that's one thing where you kind of have to determine whether or not you want to main that. I still think it's mainable, but typically you're going to be seeing like a Imperm and the Mitsurugi trap, or you're going to be seeing like the Prayer and an Imperm, whatever they can do to go ahead and just like tribute off in a Maino at any point and then Regeki your board. Usually a lot of follow-up in the hand or a lot of hand traps. Usually not going to take a lot of cards for your opponent to like absolutely just pop off. They do have the Ameno, which is going to make you send a card if you want to activate your effect. You always can just let the effect get negated, or if you have something like Nibiru, again, you can just send the Nibiru and it still resolves as much as possible, triggering the board, which is nice. A lot of people commented on the last video and they were like, but it still comes back. And it's like, well, you're out of the rest of the board, so it's fine. But at the same time, you just want to try to get through as much as possible with your hand traps. This is going to be one of the larger boards that you're going to be dealing with. But it's not going to be a hand rip unless you make it a hand rip, right? So that's one thing where if you just want to just let your opponent play it out and then go to your turn and then try to play into the board, you might be in for a better situation. But Droll Lockbird, Mistaken Arrest, cards like that will handle these boards. Even Shared Ride. Shared Ride's crazy because your opponent's just giving you a million cards. So that's one thing where you can just like counterplay really hard. But that's going to be up to you moving forward, but I hope that the end boards do help. This is going to be more Fiendsmith Ryziel. Typically, your end board is going to be a duo drive with the material, so you have Cross Negate, you have the Caesar, you have Trap lined up in Graveyard off the Lacrima. Usually you have 1 to 2 hand traps in hand and a piece of follow-up, because you always are going to have like an X or like an Ice in hand, right? Then you have Fiendsmith follow-up in the Graveyard. And now, for Detonator or Dweller, you're summoning one or the other. And a lot of times, if you're blinding into a board, I'm not even going to leave up like a Detonator. A lot of times you can just go like Dweller, but it's really scary if you blind a Dweller and it's like Malice, right? Then you're kind of like, that's not great. But at the end of the day, most of your matchups are probably going to be Ryziel, or it's going to be like Mitsurugi or Mermail, Memento. All these decks that just auto-die to Dweller. Like, the real goo right now is just Dweller Pass. Like, Dweller Pass is crazy. And if that's something that you find out really quickly in your testing, that's something you should be doing. You can pass on Detonator, that's fine. But if your opponent goes, like, first action, X pitch, like, Mirror Logic, they go after, like, Cross, you can always go, like, the Detonator, pop their X, and, like, keep popping their monsters. But then if they have cards like Talent, they can feel a little less good. So it really depends on how you want to play your end board and what you think your opponent's going to be on. But I do think that having the Dweller Pass, Dweller and Draw Phase, and then having the Cross Negate with a Caesar up and a hand trap is probably just fine, because you also have Trap and Grave. So it's just going to minimize a lot of your risk that you're going to be going into. Now the next one's going to be Malice. This is going to be Fiendsmith Malice. I think that if you're playing anything else, you're kind of trolling. If you're playing like pure Malice and then you have Lancia, better have shifted them, right? Because otherwise it's going to be a really rough go. There's too many cards. Meowls, you have Lancia, you have Phantasma that drops to dig into Lancia, you have the Sanctums that are going to be set to get into Lancia. Like, there's just too many ways to go ahead and get shut off, right? So you have to play, like, a engine that will mitigate the problems that you're going to be facing. So cards like Abalakui that can go ahead and Reborn, having the Lacrima set up in Grave so you have Trap. Typically, from what I've seen from most builds, you're going to be having just the Fiendsmith cards as extenders for things like a Bow, rather than using it to actually combo with. So you'll have Trap set up in Grave, you'll have the Binder set up in Grave. This is the Grave just fanned out. All of these are actually just in the graveyard. These aren't actually on the board. This is just to show what's all in here. So you have GWC for the White Binder. The White Binder can banish the Rabbit to get you to the MTP to get another banish. You have the Abao that can bring back your Cryptor after you link it off for the Abao. So there's many different ways you can tackle this end board. You can also pass on like a Griffin, or put a Griffin in grave, link it off, and then bring the Griffin back. Because you can also link up into Griffin, and then link one Griffin into Requiem, and then combo out from there back into like an Abao, which is really nice. So usually you'll have like 1 to 2 cards in hand. You'll have your double banish lined up, the Abao as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can play this deck, but this is going to be something very familiar as to what you'll see at the tournament. Now, the other one here is going to be Chron. This is a deck that you kind of have to just think about, because if you play against the pure variant, if you play against the Horus variant, or if you play against the Horus as Amina variant, there's going to be a lot of things you got to keep track of. But typical end boards, they're going to be ending with Cluster, which is the trap here, the continuous trap, and a Imperium or a Droplet is typical. If you see 2 back row, you can assume that it's going to be a Droplet or an Imperium, so watch your battle phases. Don't try to just swing over something like Infinity. It might not work the way you want it to. But you also have Tristalos, which can synchro on your opponent's turn. You have Citri, which can synchro on your opponent's turn. You have Infinity as a negate, and then you have 1 to 2 cards left in hand, and then Graveyard follow-up. Shoutouts to Chain User. This is Glad Beast. I got asked about this a lot, and I played against Chain User multiple times on DB, and this is just such an explosive deck. It's pretty crazy. This guy right here is an Omni. This one right here can just, like, summon another one for free. This is not once per turn, discard, negate a spell or trap, and then also SP. So the end board here gets pretty large, and of course this is going to be like better have Dark Ruler or better have Super Poly or something, right? Realistically, you want to like droll this deck or shifter this deck. If you run into Glad Beast, it's going to be kind of rough. Make sure you have like a Charmy, right? Like there's a couple different ways you can kind of slow the deck down. But if you get into a bad situation, especially this card, not once per turn, cheat a monster out of the extra deck is kind of crazy. So you have like double Omni. And if anything happens and something gets removed, you can always use this to make like another Omni, which is kind of crazy. So make sure that you're prepared for something like this. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If it was insightful, definitely let me know down below in the comment section. I just want to prepare you for the tournament because, of course, there's going to be a lot of different things to think about, especially going into this weekend because there are so many new cards and so many things that we got to know. But if you haven't already checked my socials over on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, or join my Discord, definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate all of you, and I'll catch you all at Orlando, where I will win the tournament. I'm going to do my best. All right, chat? I will do it for all of you. But we're going to do our best, and I'll talk to you guys all later. Thank you.